Let's dissect the squat pose. Now, the squat pose has a few uses. I can use it more with a focus on the hands, or I could use it more with a focus on the legs. And so instructing your students to get into it, you want to try and make sure that you have a nice lordosis, so neutral alignment of your spine. So just feel this in your body now. Sitting up straight, and as you sit up straight, you put your hand in your lower lumbar, and you just feel this little lordosis, so this natural curve, neutral natural curve that's in your lower spine. So we always want to find neutral spine in this position. So to find neutral spine for some of you students, it may involve more propping. And so what you may notice if you just come straight into this position is that you're going to come in this quite rounded position. And so the way then to help your students find a more of a neutral spine would be to lift their buttocks up. So I just place the block underneath the tip of the bolster like so. And then you want to try and have the feeling of you've got a slight anterior tilt, so pelvis is moving forward, sit bones moving back of the pelvis. And then what you're going to notice then is you can start to find this lordosis in the lower lumbar. Bringing the palms together in front of the chest as well adds an added benefit. If you're looking for just doing the stomach and the spleen pathway, because this is going to be a spleen channel pose, because you're bending the knee and you're separating the knee, because the spleen is the pathway in between your knee extensors, which is your quadriceps, so your vastus medialis, and then in between that and your adductors as well, which is going to be your liver pathway. So it's that little fascial pathway in between the two there. So that's your spleen pathway. So bend the knee, separate the knee to really start to isolate that little pathway. So this is a good pose for the spleen. So this is great to use for this. And so then using the hands in this is kind of superfluous. It's not the target area, but it is a secondary bonus, unless you want to use it as a primary channel, because it's great for the fire pathway. Because what we're doing as we're going to be extending the wrist, and as we're extending the wrist, we're starting to get this nice big juicy sensation in the wrist flexors that we have underneath here. And so we're going to get into the pericardium pathway going through the center of the forearm. Then we're going to get through the lung, which is a metal pathway. You could use this for metal if you really like. And then we're also going to get the heart, which is coming through the side of the arm here. So I use this quite a lot for the fire pathway, just because the fire can be quite tricky to find poses for. But you could also use this for the metal pathway if you wanted to as well. And so what we're going to do here is just hold this for a longer period of time. And this can be really beneficial, particularly if students are working towards doing stuff in vinyasa, to help them find that range in the wrist first, so they've got enough wrist flexion so they can easily start to come into their handstands later on down the road as well. Now, having the elbows in between the knees are very beneficial. If your hips are too high, you might find it hard to have the elbows between the knees, and I'll show you what this looks like now. So making the bum even higher. So if you're struggling to keep the lordosis in the lower back, then having the hands into prayer, you have to bend forward a lot just to find that same variation. And you can do that if you like. You can still like lean forward, elbows between the thigh, and still start to feel this little bit of lordosis in the lower lumbar. Some students may not. And so then they're going to be holding this. It's going to be a little bit less comfortable for those students. So another variation is to just do this one up against the wall, and in this way they can, instead of having to try and lean forward because they don't have the range, they can then do this up against the wall and just lean up against the wall, and then also have the knees on the inside of the elbows as well. I'll show you how to do that one. And so same variation, up against the wall, like so. And then instead of having to try and lean forward, you can just lean back in this one a little bit more. So it means students can find a position that's a little bit more comfortable for them. Knee spread wide, elbows onto the inner thigh, and they can more relax up against the wall. And you could teach this in a wall variation class anyway. It is super relaxing to do your squat pose like this. You get a lot more out of it. If your students are having a lot of trouble, you can also do frog up against the wall. Check out another video in that one, and you'll see how that one is done. And yeah, that's going to be your squat pose. You're going to be getting into your outer hip a little bit, so that's going to be your gallbladder, so your glute medius, glute max area, and then getting into your adductors into the inner thigh. So that's going to be your liver pathway. And then, like I said, fire through the center and then lung off to the side where your thumb is as well. And that's your squat pose. Just one more little note on your squat pose. One of the compression points you might actually have is just into this frontal hip point in here. So do be mindful of that. So if that's the case, it's just about trying to get those knees a little bit wider and around that compression point.